Please welcome CEO Delta Airlines Ed Bastian in conversation with Airline Weekly co-founder and senior analyst Jay Shabat and Airline Weekly editor Madhu Unnikrishnan.
Mr. Bastian, thanks for joining us today at the Skift Global Forum again this year. I want to welcome you to the conference. I just wanted to set the stage for how we're going to frame this discussion. I mean, it's almost needless to say that this is the worst crisis that has faced the airline industry in its century of history. Business travel has almost evaporated. Domestic travel is starting to come back, but international travel is at a standstill virtually. And IATA says it probably won't recover until 2024. So that's where we are in the industry now, and we just want to hear your thoughts on how it will look in the near to medium term. So let me hand it over to Jay to start the discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Madhu, and thanks for joining us, Ed. Given that backdrop that Madhu described, can you tell us a little bit about what you think the recovery is going to look like for Delta?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's good to be with you guys. But I don't know who's making those prognostications about how long it's going to take in 2024. They must have crystal balls that none of us have access to, because really this is out of the control of the industry. This is going to be based on the science. This is based on our ability as a society, as a world, to contain the virus. And the better job we do in doing that, I think the better opportunity there will be for people to start to restore some sort of normal back into their daily lives, including travel. Clearly, at Delta, we're focused on getting our domestic system back up and running, and we're doing just that. We have about 50% of our domestic flying operating at this point in time, and somewhere around 30% of our normal volumes, 30 to 35% of our normal domestic volumes that we're flying in terms of traffic at the present time. Yes, the mix is skewed heavily more towards leisure than towards business, but we're starting to see business travelers come back. Of our big corporates that we manage and measure, about 80% of them do have people traveling, though they may be small numbers. People are putting the toe back in the water and starting to get back out into the skies. So people are looking at what the experience is like. It's why it's more important than ever at Delta that we could do everything we can to reinforce and reinstill confidence in air travel. All the safety protocols that we've put in place, from the mask compliance to blocking middle seats to ensuring every single flight it goes off the cleanest possible way it can, electrostatically fobbed, and every surface wiped down before departure. All those steps are making a big difference in consumer confidence, and we're seeing it in the surveys. Our customers have ranked us a Net Promoter Score in the month that just concluded of August of a 75. Honestly, guys, if you had asked me what the odds of Delta ever hitting a 75 in NPS, I'd say that'd be hard to imagine. But with all the steps we're taking, customers are saying it's a great experience, the best experience I've ever seen at Delta, and we're trying to take what we can learn from that to make sure we continue on that into the future.
Yeah, that's great to hear that there's at least some silver linings in these difficult times. Point well taken about how the recovery, it's just really impossible to predict. But is it safe to say or reasonable to conclude that Delta will be a smaller airline for years to come?
I don't know about years. Certainly the next couple of years, yes. But when you get out beyond 2 years, I think it's really hard to anticipate. And we're not planning to be a smaller airline 3 years from now. We're assuming that we're going to get a lot of our business back. What I think you're going to find is the recovery is going to come in phases. Domestic, as we talked about, will come back the quickest, already is coming back quickest. International will lag primarily because of all of the concerns around quarantines and restrictions, and there's no overall international set of standards that countries are deploying to allow for travel between nations. That's going to take some time, and until you get to a point where the medical science has caught up to the virus, I think that's going to continue to stay very choppy. But what I do know is that when the all clear sign is given and customers are free to travel, I think there's going to be a substantial demand and an interest in getting out and seeing parts of the world, because when that's been taken away from you, you appreciate what you had. I think people are missing. I know people are missing it, missing the the optimism and the hope of actually planning a trip and the expectations of what they're going to do when they get there. And so as nations open up, as businesses open up, as theme parks open up, as the world opens up, travel is going to be right there ready to serve. But we're going to be patient. So I think it's a 2-year journey. I don't think it's a 5-year journey. I think it's a 2-year journey. I do think a portion of business travel is going to be lost for good because of video tools that we've all been forced to learn how to use. But that's okay. That's travel that I think isn't resilient, isn't travel that's sustainable. You know, those trips to Europe where you'd go for a meeting for 2 hours and turn around and fly home, that's not good for anybody. And the airlines, and no one should be building their business model on a source of revenue that doesn't have real value and sustainable value. So that part of the business, I think, will go away, but I don't think that's going to be a core piece of our business.
Great. Now, I just want to go back to something you said. It'll be about 2 years for Delta to return, or there'll be a 2-year period of sort of being a smaller airline. So the payroll support program authorized by Congress under the CARES Act expires at the end of this month. And you've come out in support of a so-called clean extension of the payroll support program through March of next year. But I'm just curious to know, why is it necessary to have that payroll support if Delta is planning to be smaller and have fewer employees?
Well, it's not about Delta, it's about the industry. Mm-hmm. And at Delta, we're not planning for large numbers of furloughs. We announced yesterday there won't be any furloughs in any of our major work groups, with the exception of the pilots, and we're hoping to be able to mitigate and minimize those as well. We still have a couple of weeks of work with ALPA yet to go. But one of the things within the industry that you've seen is that when the original payroll support was provided, which was in early April, most of us thought we'd be in a better place 6 months later relative to the virus than we are today. Unfortunately, we're in a worse place. With the virus has grown, the case counts are higher than they were back then. And I think there is a logic to saying that if it made sense then, it makes even more sense now to keep the airline intact, because the industry is essential to the recovery of our economy. If we don't have airlines in the sky, if we're not providing service to all the destinations we're providing, even on a limited basis, it's going to hurt economic development and the rebound of our economy. So it's hard to ensure that you're going to keep the levels of service that we need, that we've been flying, if there's not some form of government support for our people to keep them employed. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if that's going to carry the day or not. It has a lot of support, I know, on the Hill, has support in the administration. Whether it gets done or not is really uncertain.
Yeah, great. Now, my next question is about something that we've written a little bit about in Airline Weekly recently. There seems to be a trend where sort of all the major U.S. airlines, even the big global ones like Delta, are starting to resemble low-cost carriers in a way. I mean, we saw this move where they're matching the change fees to look more like Southwest. Is that a fair assessment of where Delta's going? Maybe looking more like an LCC?
Not at all. Not at all. We're not an LCC. We're a full-service carrier. Madhu, I think you know that earlier in the year, in fact, late last year, we already indicated to the market that we were looking at moves to change fees and to reassess all of the fees in our pricing strategies that customers either feel are punitive or don't really add value back to customer decision making. So we were already on this path to eliminate change fees. And of course, when the pandemic occurred, we needed to eliminate change fees because consumers didn't know there's too much uncertainty around travel and decisions and what the experience was going to be like relative to the virus. So we needed to open up that flexibility without punishing people for making a commitment to fly with us. And what we have found as we've looked at it for the last 6 months is that needs to continue beyond just the state of the next 6 months. That needs to continue into a regular pattern. So customers will have more confidence in travel. And as a result of that, you're taking an impediment away from buying a ticket on Delta by eliminating that change fee.
Yeah, makes sense. And I know Delta has said for sure that you want to become even more of a premium airline. Can you talk about maybe some of the other what that means, some more detail about what are in the plans to become even more premium to your passengers.
I don't know that we're looking to become even more of a premium airline. I think what I said, Madhu, and it's been a little bit maybe misunderstood, is that I think many customers are going to place a premium on the quality of the service provider more than ever coming through the pandemic. The quality, for those airlines that customers, particularly business travel, higher value customers, are going to be willing to invest in an airline that places an even higher degree of security for their health and the confidence in their travel experience. Those airlines that are instilling greater confidence in travel in consumers are going to be seen as providing a more premium experience to customers that customers should be willing to pay for. So I'm not looking deliberately to become more of a premium airline. We're looking to invest in the quality of the experience for which we expect consumers will in turn value and pay a premium to be part of.
Great. And, I just want to go a little bit sort of deeper on that. And some of the things you mentioned earlier about what you're doing. I mean, you referred to some of the steps Delta is taking to allay passengers' fears or concerns of traveling during this public health emergency. So can you spell that out for our listeners? What are some of the things that Delta is doing to make the travel experience safer? And how are you different what are you doing differently vis-a-vis your competitors and your rivals?
Well, we're doing many things, and the industry is doing many things. Right. And this is not something that we're trying to compete one to the next. I think each airline's having to make its own decisions around its safety protocols. At Delta, we're electrostatically fogging every surface, every plane before it takes off. You get on a plane, it looks brand new. There's not a speck of dirt or dust or anything. We focused on the filtration systems, the HEPA high quality air filters that replace the air and filter the air every 2 to 3 minutes during the journey. We've done a lot of education to consumers. We put it out on the website to see how quickly that airflow comes out of the cabin that captures 99.999% of any particles in the air within that couple minute period. We have focused on capping load factors. We block the middle seats. We think that provides distance on board the airplane. It gives customers, again, more confidence that they're not sitting in a middle seat, that they have more space. And we know space is important when you're trying to protect yourself during a pandemic. We've enforced masks. We're one of the first industries to have to go out and very visibly enforce masks. And at Delta, we've put people on no-fly lists for those people that aren't willing to wear a mask. We have 350 people right now on those lists. Wow. For political reasons or other reasons. They insisted upon not wearing the mask after being asked multiple times to put it back on. They're not going to fly Delta. They're not going to have the privilege. And while that was a little choppy in getting going, because you don't want your flight attendants to turn into a police state having to monitor compliance, customers appreciate it. When some of the instances I've heard where people have come off the plane because they wouldn't wear a mask, the customers were the ones pointing out it wasn't our people having to actually do the heavy lifting on some of that. We have made certain that everything that we can do, the customers can see, whether it's in the airports, because all the fogging procedures we're doing in the airports, working with TSA, making sure we've got antimicrobial bins, new bins going through the TSA stations that customers can see, and they can understand that those stations are as clean as the experience on board the plane. So everything that we've done has been designed with one goal in mind: for customers to have the same confidence in their health as they do their flight safety on Delta. And virtue of the Net Promoter Scores, where we're at a 75 in the month of August, I'd say we're succeeding.
Right. So I want to shift gears a little bit, excuse me, and return to something that we discussed on this stage a year ago. And that's about the sort of evolving role of a CEO in terms of social issues. And that last year we spoke about this, and it was on the heels of the gun control debate. Yeah. And at that time, you told me and you told our audience that this is a new role for CEOs. This is an evolving role. It's a changing role, but it's one that CEOs in any industry need to become more comfortable with. with the recent reckoning we've had in the U.S. on racial justice issues, Delta and you have been really outspoken. I just wanted to ask you what Delta is doing to meet this moment that we're having on racial justice.
Well, the pandemic has impacted all of us in unimaginable ways and has caused us all to rethink a lot of things in life, our priorities, our business, purpose. I think purpose comes into play for a lot of companies going through this, and understanding what they stand by and what the values that are going to allow them to rebuild their companies, what's really important here. And one of the things that we've seen is the juxtaposition, and I felt it living here in Atlanta, the birthplace of the civil rights movement in our country, is just how, the inequities that have shown themselves in terms of how people have had to manage through the pandemic. You've got a lot of people that have wealth, that have opportunity, have been able to disappear to their basements or their suburban houses or whatnot and escape the ravages of the pandemic. But you've had a lot of essential workers who actually are not as economically well off, whether it's Uber drivers carrying food deliveries, whether it's people working in hospitals. There's a lot of imbalance, and I think the inequities that we've seen have been heightened because of the pandemic. And the pandemic has put us all in a position of vulnerability. It's quieted us down. It's been a humbling experience. It's caused us all to pay attention and to listen and to think about priorities going forward. And what it's done, it's allowed the voices of those that have been disadvantaged to rise higher. And while a lot of this was sparked, of course, by the killing of George Floyd, this has been building for years, for decades, for centuries, one would say, in our society, to make sure that as we rebuild our companies and societies from the pandemic, we make sure we take everybody forward with us. And it's given us a chance to rethink priorities and the roles that we play in these companies, because we've seen governments have a hard time with a lot of this. Right. Governments are so politicized, and as a result of that, there's a rhetoric that is almost feeding some of the injustice and the systemic issues that we're seeing. It's polarizing. It's pulling people apart. Businesses have an opportunity to pull people together. At Delta, we have 75,000 people. I view that as my family. I view my responsibility to those 75,000, 40% of whom are people of color, to make sure they have every opportunity for advancement on the same level as any other person within the company. And so I view it personally. I take that responsibility in doing everything that we can to cause the challenges that have given rise to systemic injustice and bias to be eliminated as best we can. And it's hard. It requires a lot of listening, it requires a lot of reflection, requires us to not talk, to listen to the voices of those that walk in shoes that we have a hard time really truly understanding, and making change happen. And we're early in this journey, Madhu, and I think these are one of the things that are going to outlast the pandemic. The pandemic will come, the virus will be contained, cures will be found, people will be traveling again, okay? But unless we stop and focus on this issue, we're not going to be able to make the change happen. So I think it's incumbent upon leaders across society to step up and see what they can personally do to make a difference. That's what I'm trying to do here at Delta.
And it seems like it's a role you've become increasingly comfortable with, and one that you see as sort of inherent to the CEO's role in whatever industry. And I just wanted to sort of, in the time we have left, sort of, if you can give us some of the actionable goals that Delta is laying out in terms of increasing minority representation, particularly in the leadership ranks.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that, and this is not a new journey, we've been talking about diversity and inclusion for a lot of years, and we have a pretty good score on that at Delta. So of the 40% people of color we have, 30% are in positions of leadership at Delta in terms of the percentage, and 18% of our officers, the top 100 people of Delta, are people of color. But I think we've lost in the bigger numbers of diversity how it's affected individual ethnicities, races, genders, and you've got to disaggregate the data to find out what's happening within those numbers. And what we've seen and what I've seen at Delta is that half of the people of color are Black, yet only 7% of our officers are Black as compared to 18% of our officers are people of color. So there's been an inequity there for people of color, and we've got to solve that. We got to find out why. So being transparent and being accountable for making change comes by acknowledging you got the issue and being very public, which is hard. To acknowledge that you are not succeeding on a goal that we all should have in society, is to improve everyone's outcome and equity for the future. Looking at ways that we can solve for that, it's more than just setting a goal. It's then by mentoring people, by ensuring that you're hiring in the right place, that you're stripping away hiring standards that may be overstated the qualifications for, whether it's 4-year degrees or opportunities to get people more engaged in leadership and finding pathways. It's by making certain that you've got the community with you, that you're working with the right community partners. It's going to take us too long to just wait for the world to catch up and to grow the pipeline of new leaders. We have to interject new leaders into the process of going out in the marketplace and finding some new skills and new people that can make us a better company. So there's a lot in there. It's about education, about investing in our education system, because I think that's where at the core, a source of a lot of the inequity that we see in society is that our kids aren't getting the same opportunity as they come through the education systems. We know that's a big issue here in Atlanta. We've adopted a number of Atlanta public schools and we're all around them, and we're spending people to read to our kids, to help teach them. Particularly now, it's important during this virtual learning period that they've got the tools and they're not even further left behind from the more affluent schools in our community. So there's a lot in there. There's a 2-page set of actions. Anyone that wants to see what Delta's doing can go out on the web and pick up that action plan, that action list. And it's time for us to show up and be accountable.
Well, we could spend a very long time discussing this topic, and someday I hope to do that with you. But unfortunately, we're on time now, and I want to thank you very much for joining us once again at the Skift Global Forum this year.
Thank you for having me. It's good to see you guys, and I wish you luck with the forum.
Thank you.